Okay, so in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, we had two African American men that were intent on being able to push the black community forward. They differed in how they wanted those things to be done, but they agreed on one fundamental thing, and that is education. Those two people, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, you had one that believed that the education that needed to be done was more so about trade and about agriculture. The other one was like, no, we need intellectuals, and that's how we're going to be able to advance things and move things forward. I personally am underneath the belief that you need both, and that's just because of the economies within the United States of America. They differ based off of the state. Right. So, and a lot of those places where it's heavily agricultural, yes, you'll need to know agriculture. And for those places that are more city-like, you'll need to have the intellectual side of things, which is typically a degree in some type of, MBA or, something along those lines. Right. Most recently, there is an article that was written and published in the New York Times. And it talks about the decline of the African American male enrollment in university. Specifically, they took a look at Howard University. Howard University currently has 19% non-black students. And then they also have 19% black males that are enrolled in the university. And these statistics are troubling because you also have places like Morehouse that specifically target the enrollment for all black men, or just men in general, right? And the reason why that's an issue is because if there is a decline in the amount of black men that are seeking a higher education, then it means that that Morehouse will have to adjust their recruitment process to be able to find or target other black men outside of the United States, to which they were also considering Canada, right? Which is always a consideration, but it's not a priority, right? Roland Martin had a conversation during this last election cycle that was talking to men about how we can help our black boys get out of elementary, middle, and high school and then be able to pursue higher education. And some of the things that they stated, Roland Martin agreed were issues. However, he also agreed that they are issues not only for black boys, but they're also issues for black girls. So when you're talking about education, and the financial system that governs a lot of these educational institutions, like the middle schools, the high schools where predominantly black kids attend, that's going to affect both the boys and the girls. Same exact thing for suspensions. Those numbers seem to be more equal than unequal. Same exact thing for representation, and things of that nature. And so Roland Martin poses the question in saying he wants to be able to identify what is the independent issue that has caused black men the greatest hurdle in being able to achieve academically or go on to academic achievement. Now, currently, this administration has a full onslaught targeting the Department of Education and education in general, wanting to dismantle it, no longer assisting students that have IEPs, things of that nature, right? And I think that it would be ignorant of us to believe that black women being the most educated population and growing in the United States of America is not an impacting factor, because it is. It is. That's because for centuries, education has always been a privilege to the privileged, or the privilege of the wealthy, or the privilege of the white. So at no point when education was established was it ever thought to be a means to level the playing fields for black people or people of color. However, during slavery, right? During slavery, those slaves that knew how to read were both considered more dangerous, but also considered more expensive. And it was because they were able to do more things than slaves that were not able to read. Right? So that was a privilege amongst the privileged, even amongst black people. And so by the time emancipation happened and the 13th Amendment was passed and slavery was no longer a thing and it was constitutionally rejected, black people immediately begin to create educational systems, educational schools, rather, that would be able to teach on all levels, to be able to help us to have our own people that operated in professions where we were going to need assistance, being doctors, lawyers, etc. Right? Doctors, lawyers, teachers, farmers, things of that nature. And so going back to the article that's been written as of late, they are seeking to be able to identify kind of what is the crux problem there that has such a vast chasm within the statistics of Black women graduating and having higher education and Black men. And I want you to know that this is taking a look at both educational systems, like trade education as well as university education, right? And I don't really have the answer for this, but I do believe that it is a conversation that needs to be had. One thing that I don't want this conversation to spin out to is a comparison of roadblocks, right? Yes, we do know about the prison pipeline system, where prisons are established based off of the reading levels of Black boys in the 3rd grade. That has been something that's been studied for decades, and that is still something that is needing to be reformed, for sure. That is a major hurdle for Black boys. At the same time, women have a very major hurdle as well, and that is being that they tend to account for overwhelming majority of single parent homes. And so they tend to be the predominant one raising the kids 24/7, right? Or having sole custody of the child. And so I don't want us to kind of get into that type of vein of conversation. I would like to be able to explore it on a more factual basis, to be able to identify kind of what that issue is. What is the difference? Is it a sociological difference? Is it because of the way that we are socially raising our sons versus the way that we are socially raising our daughters? Is it because there is a particular learning style that is better suited for boys that isn't being employed and therefore holding them back? Or is it what Touré suggested, which he stated that along with the article, which I didn't really get from the article, but he says that it's due to just a difference of opinion about what's necessary and what's not nowadays. And he's saying that it seems as though Black men are feeling that having an education is no longer necessary to be able to live a stable life or to be able to provide for yourself and a family. Or that the investment in the education isn't worth the return. And so I think that this is a great conversation for us to be able to have, because Black men are very necessary. And when you're talking about the construction of the Black household, the article suggests that there's going to have to be a change in that. And that's just because with Black women being more educated and therefore making more money. And it also identified that over a lifetime, Black women out earn white women just because we tend to work longer. And on top of working longer, we also are beginning to make more money. And so what are your thoughts, especially if you're a Black man? What are some of the challenges, even for those of you that have a degree? What are some of the challenges that you had to overcome that you feel like are challenges that are specifically targeting Black men unproportionately or in a disproportional rate? And how do you just feel about the overall general conversation of things? Remember that this is a safe space. We're here to have a conversation, and we're also here to be educated by one another. And so you never know what you could learn reading the comments.